I really want people to feel like they're not stuck in a really small box of what sex can be like. And I think cannabis, in the way that it's been helpful for artists and musicians over decades and probably centuries, that it expands your creativity and your inspiration. And you can do that same thing with sex when you do it intentionally.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Different Leaf, the podcast. I'm Britt Smith, and Happy New Year to all of you. Anyone else notice that 2021 is kind of off to a bit of a rocky start? We've already witnessed a violent coup attempt in the middle of the surging pandemic, and I don't know about you, but I could definitely do with some tips on how to relax this year. This very timely episode, we're going to be discussing how cannabis can help us release our stress and reconnect by integrating marijuana into our sex lives, no matter how rusty those skills might be. Since we're talking about a double taboo today, just a quick heads up that the language in this episode is probably not suitable for little ears. And also, if you're one of my parents, it would be kind of cool if you would just skip this one as well, Mum and Dad. And so, much to my dismay, today we're talking about the role that cannabis and CBD can play in enhancing the pleasures of sex and in changing the way we think about our bodies. To be honest, I am a proper British lady, and discussing such intimate issues made me blush like a teenager in sex ed class. But when somebody suggested this topic to me, I couldn't miss the chance to talk to the canisexual herself, sex educator and coach, Ashley Manta, about the research that went into her new book, The CBD Solution, Sex. I read Ashley's book over the holidays, and I admit I was expecting to giggle my way through a how-to book on what pot products are okay to rub on your junk. But it was so much more than that. It's about considering sex in all its forms and where CBD and THC can develop the way we think and feel about the ideas that we have about sex. The book also touched on how cannabinoids can help us address any shame that we might have learned around our bodies at a young age, or perhaps through trauma, how weed enhances the experience of physical sensations and connection, and what pot products are working best for certain sexual experiences. Okay, strap in, folks. Or strap on, whatever. I don't know. Just get ready to hear me blush. So, Ashley, thank you so much for joining me. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you. How are you doing?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for having me.
So I've heard a lot about you. I know a lot about your books, your talks, your coaching. And this time around, I'm really interested in your newest book, The CBD Solution. So, we've all just kind of come out of a really rough year. And a lot of us have been incredibly disconnected, I think, with ourselves and with our loved ones. So really reading through this book sort of gave me a bit of hope in the new year. I loved how it was, for singles and for partnered, all-inclusive, straight, bi, gay, anybody. What pushed you to want to write something that would be so helpful for people in time of such need?
Well, thank you for asking. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. The book was actually really the brainchild of Mary Jane, which is a media company that's US-based. And they put out a series of 3 books, each titled The CBD Solution with a subtitle. Mine happens to be the sex book. And when they approached me, they were like, we want to do this series. We want it to be really approachable for people who are maybe new to cannabis and who want sort of an intro level primer on how to start to incorporate CBD and other cannabinoids into their lives. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. I'm so excited. And I had been wanting to write a sex and cannabis book for quite some time. I'd probably had it planned out in my head for years. And I had a 3-week deadline. So it was good that I had it planned in advance.
Wow.
Yep. The whole book written in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. The editing took a little bit longer, but yeah, the manuscript, 30,000 words, 3 weeks. It was intense.
Wow.
But I was very excited to get to really lay out some of the things that I think are missing when I speak with my clients and when I do workshops around like basic consent, pleasure-based anatomy, lubes, different sex acts that people, only associate sex as penetration, and typically a very heteronormative version of penetration, which is penis and vagina. Mm. And I wanted this book, in addition to being, informative about CBD and cannabis, to be really eye-opening in terms of like, you get to define your sex like however you choose, and cannabis can help you take some of the shame away from doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I got from it. Just the first thing I really got from it was discussing the shame that we've all grown up with without really knowing it, and how cannabis can help you kind of let go of some of that internalized shame.
Yeah.
How do you think that people who are first starting out with cannabis and they want to try and incorporate some of it into either their own personal masturbation or just their own sex life with their partner, what's a good place to start with something like cannabis?
Well, I would definitely encourage them to try any new product solo and masturbate. That's the best way to kind of figure out what products work best for you. And for new consumers, I tend to steer them a little bit away from things that could be intoxicating. So I like to start people out with topicals. It is a very beginner-friendly, low-impact way of starting to work with these compounds, and you get really positive results without having to worry at all about what happens if I get too high.
I got to break the news to you. I'm English, and so that makes me sort of prudish around talking about sex. This was almost an embarrassing book to read for me. And you know, English people, we throw around the P word and the C word. My mum's listening, so I'm gonna edit myself right now. But I've got no problem with any of the language. But when it comes to really addressing and thinking about your own sex life and how you can start masturbating to practice with a sex toy, I blush. I'm blushing right now. I can feel my cheeks going hot. This is really a topic that a lot of people don't feel comfortable discussing with their partners. So, you know, after you've found something that you feel comfortable with solo, how do you talk about that with a partner?
So first of all, your experience is not unique. And I mean that in a good way.
Good to know.
I know so many people who are super ashamed around sex and having conversations about it. And it feels like they get blushy and kind of squirmy. And I don't want to have this conversation and get maybe a little jittery. You're normal. It's okay. Cool. We live in a culture around the world that is really unfriendly towards sex and pleasure. So you are fighting against generations of shame. So you're okay. You're doing great. Just keep breathing.
All right. I'm still here.
Right? You got this.
Yeah.
It is hard. And so acknowledging that it's okay that I'm scared. It's okay that I feel awkward. It's okay that I'm a little nervous about this is kind of a good place to start, because it's going to feel clunky. Just like the first time you rode a bike or the first time, you tried to cook something, you're kind of unsure. You don't really know how the things work. You don't have your muscle memory built up yet. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And that's the way it is with sex and talking about sex as well. And so I like to use icebreakers like my book. You can say, hey, partner, I just read this book and I had some thoughts about how we could, really deepen our connection with each other. And would you be interested in chatting about that a little bit? That's a great place to start.
I think that's one thing that we find from cannabis is that it really opens up the lines of communication quite comfortably between people. That being said, you do write about the fact that some people get kind of paranoid or overly intoxicated. So that's honestly why I would think to start with CBD would be a little bit safer and a little bit calmer for first timers. So when we're talking about picking a CBD product or even a THC product, how do you know which method of ingestion to start with?
So I like to start with tinctures, especially for newbies, because they're pretty rapid acting and they're easier to dose. I just actually had my colleague, Dr. Jordan Tischler, who's a Harvard MD, on my podcast a couple weeks ago.
We know him.
Love Jordan. He's so great. And he's a really big fan of inhalation because he'll say one puff is a single deep breath, a full inhale and then an exhale, and that's one puff. And I think that is a solid, because everybody's lung capacity is a little bit different, but you know that if you fill your lungs to capacity and that's one puff, you can kind of titrate from there. But I like tinctures because some people who are just very sensitive, one puff is too much.
Yeah.
And so I if it has any THC in it at all, I want to start with one drop and then wait 10 or 15 minutes and see how you feel. And then go from there and add more as you feel comfortable. And you're right. CBD products, CBD rich products specifically, are really useful in that area. Hemp and cannabis are the same. The only difference is a legal designation, which is hemp to qualify as hemp, it has to have less than 0.3% THC. It is the same plant. It has the same cannabinoids. It has the same terpenes. It's just the amount of THC. If it's less than 0.3%, it's considered hemp. If it's more than 0.3%, it's considered cannabis and has to be sold through a licensed distribution apparatus. So for those who are brand new, I would start with a hemp CBD. Like they have flour that you can buy, hemp flour online, and it'll ship right to your house. And you can mix that with maybe some other herbs like a mullein or damiana, which are just other like smokable herbs, very safe for human consumption. And will also give you sort of like calming, relaxing, occasionally stimulating effects, depending on which herb you go with. And my book has a couple of like smokable herb blend ideas. But if you are in a state where you can access cannabis, even there, starting with a very low amount of THC, I think is a good place to start. Things that are maybe 5% THC, certainly not more than 15% THC for someone who's new.
Yeah, for sure. I've had a little too high a THC level before. And while I think that cannabis can really aid in sexuality, like you can drop your inhibitions and you can feel sort of sexier whenever I smoke anyway. I've found that like if I have something that's too high a THC, that's where the paranoia starts to kick in. And that's the sort of curve that you've got to figure out for each body, I guess.
It's exactly right. And mindset and setting make a difference. Also hormones. People who have estrogen flowing through their veins, estrogen actually modulates the way that your body processes THC. So you'll notice that like people who are peri or postmenopausal will actually have higher tolerance than they may have when they were younger because having higher estrogen levels makes you more susceptible to the effects of THC. So that's something to keep in mind that most people like don't consider. Where are you in your cycle if you're someone who bleeds? Like that will all make an impact. Are you safe? Are you in an environment that feels comfortable? Have you eaten recently? All of those things will factor into how cannabis affects you, which is why when people are like, what's the best strain for sex? I'm like, how the fuck should I know?
Yeah. Also, it's different for each person. Some people want sort of a body high and they want to feel really sensual. And some people want to get out of their heads. And like you write about this a lot. You write a lot about the scientific side of how cannabis enhances sex, like what's really happening inside the body, whether it's coming, through the skin or through the lungs, or how cannabis is impacting us. And then the cultural impacts as well, like how we can become more inclusive and open and how we can lower the barriers of stigma. So, this book it's got a lot to it, but I think that it's, for me at least, it was more of like a discussion of how I think about sex and then how cannabis can aid in expanding the way that I think about my sex life, I guess.
Yes.
I'm assuming that's what you were going for.
That is exactly what I was going for. I really want people to feel like they're not stuck in a really small box of what sex can be like. And I think cannabis, in the way that it's been helpful for artists and musicians over decades and probably centuries, that it expands your creativity and your inspiration. And you can do that same thing with sex when you do it intentionally.
So I want to talk a little bit about how you've written about self-care in this book. Yes. You've got whole chapters on solo sex with cannabis. Is masturbation vital, do you think?
I really do think masturbation is vital.
Why? What do you think we're missing if we don't do it every day?
Well, it doesn't have to be every day. Like I certainly masturbate every day, but you don't have to, fit it into your schedule where it's appropriate.
My producer is laughing her head off. Like that, Andrea.
I tend to think that that pleasure is better than coffee in the morning for really starting your day off on a high note. But generally, even if you're masturbating once a week or once a month, but doing it with some frequency, it's good for you. Knowing your body is good for you. Taking time for yourself where you don't have to perform, where you don't have to do, where you don't have to hustle, where you just get to be with yourself, be with your body, explore the different facets of sensation as they are occurring in the moment and not having to focus on anyone else's pleasure but yours.
Because there's a lot of stress, I think, often with sex. You talk about this in the book. There's the goal of getting to the orgasm and that this is like the end goal. And, it's not really about in the enjoyment along the way. And you're right with that hustle. There's just like, we're hoping to get there. And that's, there's a real stress often for some people. There's a real stress about maintaining either being wet or having an erection. There's stress around, pleasing your other partner and making sure that